I want to talk for a minute about one of the most common mistakes I see from beginner and novice carriage drivers. This mistake is preventing them from progressing in their driving, and it's making their horse's job harder than it needs to be. So if this is you, I'm going to bet that your horse is wiggly, they can't seem to drive in a straight line, and you probably have to work really hard to steer. Your horse might be balky, hesitant to go forward, or on the other hand, they might charge forward quite aggressively. By and large, their responses to your voice commands are likely either overly abrupt or just generally lackadaisical. They might be more or less walking and halting as you ask, but it probably feels clumsy and awkward. See, there seems to be a misconception, particularly among beginner and novice carriage drivers, that the lighter your contact, the better your horse will go. And while I think this idea is well-intentioned, unfortunately it misses the mark. Watch any of the world's top drivers. I'm talking high-level combined drivers, outstanding draft horse hitches like the Budweiser Clydesdales. You're never going to see a slack in these drivers' lines. Reality is that in the long term, horses who are driven with too little contact will never actually have the opportunity to live up to their full potential in harness, and that's because they're forced to accommodate their driver's lack of refinement. What's more, these horses quite often develop bad habits over time. Things like throwing themselves into the harness, screeching to a halt, and sometimes adopting a habitual posture that becomes detrimental to their long-term well-being. This puts these horses at a much greater risk of developing injuries or premature lameness. In fact, one of the best commercial carriage horses that I've ever known had his career cut short because of a chronic back injury. And this injury probably could have been avoided if his drivers had known how they could guide this horse through effective line contact. In order to achieve the level of finesse that you see from world-class turnouts, these drivers maintain a consistent stability in their line contact that allows them to communicate very minute information, very small adjustments to their horses in just a split second. This is how they create the agility and the responsiveness that we so admire, and it's how they give their horses the confidence to perform their best in environments that, quite frankly, would have most horses coming apart at the seams. Those wild obstacles you see in the top CDEs, or those stadiums filled with 50,000 screaming fans that the Budweiser horses perform in front of. Even the best horses out there would falter without impeccable direction from their driver. And that kind of leadership, it's just not possible if we don't have active contact through our lines. So this is why I teach my students right from the beginning to find a stable, responsive contact through your driving lines and to use that contact effectively. So it's not just about becoming comfortable with the idea of contact. It's also about learning to assess just the right amount of contact for this particular horse on this day in this unique situation. This is where driving really becomes an art. When you get it right, you'll know just by your horse's way of going. She'll step smoothly into each gate and she'll land gently into a quiet halt. Her straight lines will become much straighter, her turns will be round and even. You'll be able to steer through complicated patterns with precision as she's now tuned into your every finger twitch. As your horse begins to relax into the stability offered by your hands, you'll feel her whole body begin to swing more fluidly, and the cadence of her gaits becomes more steady. She'll step out in front of you with greater confidence and poise, and she'll even be less fazed by surprises in her environment. Now, some of you are probably resisting this idea that lighter contact may not actually be better. I can remember exactly where I was, driving, by the way, a very cool horse, when I was first told that I needed to drive with more contact in my lines. I'll be honest here, I didn't like hearing that. Not one bit. But it came from a coach who I deeply respected and trusted, and so I was willing to give it a try. And dang it if that plucky little horse didn't immediately give us a smoother ride. So as much as my monkey brain wanted to object, I just couldn't dispute the positive changes I started to see in every one of my horses. So this idea that lighter is better, it absolutely comes from a very well-intentioned place, and it certainly has its rightful place in our horsemanship. But in the context of driving, it misses the mark. See, driving is unique in that not only do we have no direct physical contact with our horse, but our horse can't even see us at all. Our lines are the only means through which our horse can feel us and we can feel her. So with that great power comes great responsibility. So I'd like to propose that instead of worrying about this idea of lightness, let's focus instead on responsiveness. What is responsive contact? Responsive contact feels deep into the horse's body and melts into her movement. Responsive contact feels the lightest change or imbalance and responds accordingly. Responsive contact adapts effortlessly to the horse and to the environment to bring out the best in every horse we drive every day. So, how are you supposed to know when your line contact is right? Well, let's maybe allow our horses to be the judge. If your contact is too light, your horse is likely going to be wiggly in their direction and jerky in their transitions. If your contact is overly heavy and dead, you're going to feel like an anchor being dragged around by your horse's face. Obviously, we don't want that either. But there are a few telltale signs that suggest your contact is pretty good. When your horse is stepping off smoothly from the halt, maintaining an even pace, traveling in straight lines and in smooth curves. When she's relaxed through her whole body and reaching gently into your contact. When her hind legs are stepping deep underneath her belly, her head is softly bobbing in the rhythm of her gait, and her ears might even be flopping along with her steps. So I want to encourage you to get out there and experiment with it. Try it out. Experiment with your contact. When what I just described is the horse that you have in front of you, that's when you'll know that you're doing something that's working for her. You're enabling her to perform at her best. Now, if you're a new or novice carriage driver, or if you're a rider who's curious about driving, I want to invite you to join me for a free webinar. Sunday, July 23rd, I'm going to be talking about all things driving from the perspective of a rider, and I'm going to be answering some of the most common questions I hear from those new to the discipline. So click the sign up link below this video, or you can visit christinebeattyequine.com/webinar to reserve your spot now. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you'll join me on July 23rd. Thanks so much for watching.